Hello, and welcome to Metachemistry. This is episode 96, and today we have a special topic. It's been kind of buzzing around everywhere already, and while we don't normally consider ourselves a news source for Infinity, it's just too exciting not to talk about. And that, of course, is the studio update number 43, which is the GenCon 2024 seminar. And among plenty of other exciting things that came up, the most prominent one being the announcement of Infinity N5, the fifth edition of Infinity, which will be coming out, I believe, in mid October. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today. We want to go over the panel a little bit, talk about some of the new stuff that is happening, talk about the little bits of information that have come out for N5, and just kind of look to the future that is rapidly approaching. But before we get started on that, we want to give a quick shout out to Mo Games, sponsor of Metachemistry. Mythic's Online Emporium is an online supplier of Infinity, which you can find at mo-games.com. And as part of that sponsorship, any of our patron members get a 10% discount code to that store. So feel free to check that out. And in addition, they also provide us with a $40 coupon code to raffle off each month. So to enter for that, you just need to be part of our Discord. You don't have to be a patron or anything like that. But just being on our Discord makes you eligible to win that $40 coupon code that we provide each month thanks to Mo Games. Because what's better than games? Mo Games. And for this episode, we have Ian and myself. And so, Ian, just trying to see how things have been going for your hobby and gaming endeavors. I know that the Krug is rapidly approaching.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I haven't been doing much. Life, work, all that's been kind of kicking me in the dick lately. So, haven't really done any gaming a whole lot. I'll be honest, I haven't touched Infinity since Salt Lake Showdown. So I should probably, figure out what I'm going to play for Krug. I mean, it's going to be Verona. We know that.
Yeah, the last hurrah.
Yeah, and then we'll reevaluate the format in light of N5 and also, a full season sometimes is a lot. Maybe it'll be a half season or on an event by event basis or something. But I do want to continue with the having you listeners vote on what I'm going to play. But yeah, Varuna was. I'm not going to say I don't like them because obviously I do like them, but I'm ready to be done with them.
Yeah, I know it's been kind of the strict Infinity diet in terms of what's available for Varuna, and they have good tools. They can do well, obviously. I mean, we just had Steven on talk about that, but
so they are fantastic. I wanna do some other stuff, and like every time that I'm talking to somebody, and they're like, "Oh, this faction and this," and I'm just like, "Man, I want to come play that right now." So I'm itching for something different. So
feel that.
Give them one last go at the Krug, see how it goes, and then put them back on the shelf for a while.
Yeah, I mean, and if anything, SLS has shown us that not preparing is the best strategy.
Hey, my Maximus list is currently 5-0. I've played it 5 times and won every game.
Nice.
So I'm just saying, went in with having test run it once, and the only game I lost at Showdown was the game I didn't play that list.
The downfall. Should have just kept playing Maximus.
Yeah, no, I don't think that list would have been great for Biotech 4, but that's fine.
Yeah, so for me, I have been able to get in a handful of games. I have been playing Krug missions, but I haven't settled on a list like I probably should have by now, considering at time of recording we're
3 weeks.
3 weeks out? Yeah.
Yep.
So Yeah, it's cutting it close. I should probably have a list to try and work with, but I am planning on bringing Tunguska. They I ended up playing OSS last year at the Krug, and so this year I brought OSS to SLS, and the year before I brought Tunguska to SLS, so I'm gonna
Just
bring that to
flip
the Krug
flopping them.
this year. Yeah, because they're at least mostly painted, so I should have a fully painted list as soon as I
Painted
figure out
models.
what that
What's
list
that?
is.
I've fallen off that wagon real hard.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
okay. I promise I will get my prize support for Krug painted on time.
Yeah, I have a project as well that will be available at the Krug. I am pretty excited with how it's going so far. Um, I think it'll be fun. I'm sure somebody will enjoy it. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, otherwise, I mean, mostly just trying to get in regular weekly games where I can occasionally get a second one if I'm lucky. Um, but yeah, should be fun stuff. So, as far as the seminar itself goes, that was as of recording yesterday. August 3rd was the GenCon seminar for Infinity, and there's tons of exciting stuff going on.
Hmm.
Most of it we're just going to real quickly touch on, but it's stuff that I think is good to know about. Big one as far as like stuff we won't go into deeply is Paradise Lost. The trailer's been out for a little bit. I think it looks fantastic. I'm super excited for it. And I think having a place to tell Infinity stories
Hmm.
is awesome. Like,
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff that gets people excited to play games, is kind of feeling like they're a part of that world a little bit,
Yeah.
and
One
it's a really
something
great. Mhm.
that I think was really cool about this project is you end up with a lot of IPs where the IP creator is trying to, shop it around to make that deal. And what it sounds like from this is that the guy that is like directing, producing it in his company, he plays and he approached Corvus Belli about it.
Mhm.
So, he's fully on board with um, the IP, with having Corvus Belli in on making sure everything is lore accurate, that kind of stuff. And I think it's just really exciting because everybody involved, this is kind of a passion project, it sounds like.
Yeah, which is great. Like, that's super exciting, and so I'm really glad to see something like that show up, and I have pretty high hopes for that. I think it'll be really good. But yeah, it's just a way to make
Hmm.
the world feel more accessible, because I think Infinity lore is not super easy to get a hold of for a
Yeah.
lot of people. Like, you do have the rule book and supplements that have a lot of there's a lot of fluff in those, but I feel like that's not something most people are just going to pick up off a shelf and check out. And I
Well, and
feel like
especially
most players.
how it's written in most of that, and like I'm not knocking how it's written because it's very cool because everything is written kind of like an in-universe document, but it means that it has a perspective of
Mhm.
whoever the in-universe author is. So there's misinformation, there's bias, and all this stuff, which again I think is super cool, but it does
Yeah,
make it kind of hard to digest some of that lore for somebody new that hasn't doesn't really coming in, you're not maybe necessarily getting that perspective yet, or understanding
yeah.
how that's coming. It's just it's very dense and confusing. I remember picking up the N2 books and going, "What the hell is this? What's going on?" Well, and it took a
Right.
minute, but it's like, oh, okay, this is really cool, and I like how they're doing it. But it's definitely not the easiest for a newer player.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in Infinity. It's very nuanced in a lot of ways. And I think that one of the things that I often find appealing about miniature games is the kind of, your dudes aspect of it, where you kind of have an idea of who your troops are and kind of have a little kind of natural narrative that starts to happen, or a story that you kind of associate them with, or things like that. And I think that this will be a really great way to help those sorts of players that enjoy that,
Mhm.
as well as just help people that have no idea what Infinity is kind of get a feel for the setting. And I love that you'll be able to look at the screen and you'll look at the model range and there'll be things that match, and they will likely,
Yeah.
I'm guessing, they will likely do similar things, and you'll kind of get to see that
Mhm.
showcase a little bit, which will be really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And from a lore perspective, I think it's really exciting where it looks like they're going with this from some of the stuff that was said in the seminar and things like that. I think it's a really good point in the lore to like bring people in with this show, in that it appears that it's hitting the first offensive in the Paradiso front, like right when the Onyx Contact Force and Combined Army like come through and make kind of first contact and first invade, and so you're seeing some of that perspective
Mhm.
on the ground. And I think that's actually, if that's the route they're going, like it sounded like it, that's a great entry point to kind of see the makeup of the Infinity Universe and kind of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, and at Lexodus, it sounds like they're based on the seminar and the Q&A. It sounds like they are planning uh, a fair bit of content, depending on how
Hmm.
well things work out. Of course, it has to be financially viable.
Yeah,
But assuming things go well, they're going to keep making stuff, which I
yeah,
think is awesome. I'm super
yeah. And they
excited.
said they're talking about a season 2 already and this, that, and the other, but they're still, it sounds like they're still working on distribution and all that. And so they've kind of asked, like, everybody, go out and talk about it and like post it on your social media and do whatever, just kind of get the word out, to make it easier for them to pick that up for get that picked up for distribution, and have the excitement and bring in new people kind of
Yeah.
thing and grow it so that they can keep making more.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, if you want to see more Infinity media, do that.
Yeah, and they're talking more novels and more mangas and more other formats and forms that didn't really get specific on, but just different ways to kind of expand out Infinity. And that's kind of exciting, having been in this game for quite a long time and how much love I have for it. And it feels like this is kind of like that critical mass point where like really cool stuff could start to happen, as if the brand like takes off and really explodes.
For sure. Yeah, it definitely feels like we're, on the verge of a tipping point for Infinity, which
Yeah.
could be really awesome. Um, and of course, like they do at every studio update, more or less, there were a slew of new miniatures. So lots of cool stuff there. We said we wouldn't, go in too far on Paradise Lost, but we really won't go very far on the miniatures
Yeah.
themselves. But mostly, there's these pictures have been shown like on the official Discord, and you can find them on our Discord and things like that. We have links to all those official news items and the like. The big ones for me, I think I'm excited about the support box for Torchlight, which will come with a couple of Kludgers and a Wave Rider. Those are solid profiles. I have been kind of toying around with the idea of Assassins. The show has kind of, excited that a little bit more, as it has a lot of people. But I was thinking about it, before. And there's a new Algebel on the
Oof,
way,
so good.
so I'm excited for that. New Mukhtar for Rama, which is great. And a couple other things, general release Samza. And a big one is going to be the reinforcements box for JSA. So that has a bunch of new units. We won't go over them here, but they have, a full box of added reinforcements because they are becoming their own faction in
Yeah.
N5. So they are leaving the ranks of the non-aligned and they are
Yeah.
becoming fully aligned to themselves.
Yeah. And getting their own sectorials as the time goes on. So they
Exactly.
already mentioned the first one is like the Shingenbutai or something in that vein. It
Yeah, it
sounds
sounded
really
like
cool.
it sounded like Shindo Butai or something close
Yeah.
to that. It's a little hard to tell from the
Yeah, the
from
audio
some of
is
the media
pretty
there.
pretty low when we're trying to listen to it. But yeah, no, like super cool there, and they're getting, the reinforcements because they're getting to come in their own faction. They're getting a bunch of extra stuff, new models and things. It just sounds super cool, and I kind of like because obviously Infinity, the lore and the timeline updates with every release, and so they factor that in, and that's why some things go away and new things come in, and they make it make sense. And I've always loved that about Infinity. But like going after the end song and the new wormhole, apparently the exploration colony ship got kind of hijacked from Pano by JSA, and they claimed a planet for themselves, and so new 2-player starter box coming.
Yeah. So the N5 release battle box, it'll be Operation Sand Trap, and so that's going to feature JSA and Pano. Sounds like it will be the Shindo Butai and the Kestrel Colonial Force. My suspicion is that the Kestrel Colonial Force will be kind of a reimagining of a Contasamento,
Mm-hmm.
considering Paradiso has kind of been more or less lost. Uh, so that's kind of, and I mean, also the Tikbalang resculpt is also kind of nudging me that direction.
Yeah.
So pure speculation on my part, but that's my guess there.
Or maybe it's a Acon Neoterra mixture with some new stuff.
Sure.
Not a lot of any real details on what that's going to be yet. But
I also mentioned that the existing JSA units, like the sectorial that we see today, will be part of Oban or the Great Watch. So it sounds like they're planning 2 sectorials at launch, is kind of the
Mhm.
implication there. Or maybe that they will soon after become another sectorial.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so those will be kind of like their core forces, and then this Shinto Butai will be the protective force for the new planet that's been colonized on the other side of this new wormhole that's opened up.
Yep, and now the Mechazoid Sokorentai tag profile being so similar to the Yoyoroi now makes sense, because that is apparently going to be in the new sectorial as kind of that sectorial's tag instead of the Yoyoroi.
Yeah, which definitely makes me feel a little better about it. I know we talked
Mm-hmm.
about it on the Discord a bit. Basically, that just felt too similar. Like it's not a bad profile. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It just felt like it overlapped far too heavily with the Oyore.
Mm-hmm.
But there you go. Now they're not going to necessarily be in contention in the same
Yeah.
way.
Oh yeah, and one of the models revealed that I'm excited for, I did not see coming. New Daioka Dengakitai with a Pano HMG,
Yeah.
and it looks real good. Because I've always liked the existing model and the profile, but wow, the new one is really good.
Yeah, it looks sweet, and having an HMG on that sort of platform is kind of what you're looking for. The Red Fury generally feels kind of anemic,
Mm-hmm.
um, especially if you're putting it on a semi-elite platform or better.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's one thing if you have, say, the motorized bounty hunter with a Red Fury, great profile. I think that's totally fine. But when you're spending, 40, 50 plus points on a gun platform, I feel like you want it to be able to deal with more targets than a Red Fury often allows you to deal with.
Yeah.
But yeah, so some of the talking points in terms of N5 that Carlos brought up. One, that the core rule set is going to stay intact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be more polishing. They said polishing the diamond in the presentation. They're going
Yeah,
to be just further refining what's already there. Making it work better, be a little more user friendly, especially for new players coming in, but while keeping all of the core part of Infinity intact.
yeah. So D20s, face to face rolls, AROs, um, all of that stuff that makes Infinity what it is staying. And so they're going to continue using community feedback and kind of keep the game in the same general vein. And the idea is to clear up some of the remaining issues that they can identify, and then kind of enter some new design space around that. And so one of the things that I'm pretty excited for, and I think that a lot of people will enjoy that, is that they're going to do an optimization update in Army. So that is going to be kind of a sweeping balance pass across the game. I think that's going to be awesome because a lot of times, for sectorals and units that have kind of been there for a while, they might have kind of fallen off a little bit, and it's a good chance to kind of bring everything up to a similar vein. One of the things that stands out as an example is we've seen some of the N5 demo cards from GenCon, and so things like the Orc Trooper. It's like there was an Orc Trooper with multi-rifle as one of the options in the JSA versus Pano demo there. And so it was it 28 points?
Yep, instead of 31.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like that's not a massive change, but it is
And
a
like
notable one. The
what's
Shikami.
Yeah, yeah, and then they also showed one from a Shikami that was 46 points, and it had a multi rifle, which currently no Shikami profile has. That said, that there's a few other changes like an increase in ballistic skill. Didn't have courage or stealth on it. However, I'm going to point out that these may have been demo materials that were not
Yeah.
100% what the final stuff is going to be.
Yeah.
But it looks like
I think they
they're
were
doing
simplified.
some maybe some simplification stuff. But yeah, they're doing a good balance pass on everything. It sounds like.
Yeah. And so Carlos was also talking about kind of keeping the high momentum for Infinity forward. And a lot of people have been mentioning this, and I certainly agree that there's been a lot of media push for Infinity. They've sponsored a lot of really popular miniature painters and their YouTube channels and have been kind of spreading that around. I've seen probably half a dozen in the last week or two from various sources like Miniac and Ninjon and Dana Howell and Sergio Calvo, Jose Da Vinci. So lots of stuff. There was another one, 52 miniatures, I think. But yeah, so lots and lots of coverage there. Obviously, a new edition is going to attract new players. There's the show that's coming out. Like, there's a lot of things happening right now. Technically, the new, large language model AI tool. I mean, I don't know if there's a lot to talk about there, but
Yeah. Well, and I think the
yeah,
other side thing is they're talking about making the onboarding to Infinity for newer players easier. We don't know what that looks like yet, but it sounds like Code 1 has run its course and it's likely to be going away. And it sounds like they're looking at more of a ramp up effect going forward where you buy this starter box and then kind of like what Code 1 proposed, where you would buy a starter box and then like this booster and kind of thing, except for instead of having a simplified rule set, it would just go straight into N5, but you would buy like this and then the next booster would add in units that had the next set of like special rules and so on until you and your friend that you started it with would then get up to full N5 speed, be able to play with everyone else. And it sounds like they're looking at really trying to make that process easier and more accessible.
yeah, like it's the word's kind of getting spread out there, and I think that that's definitely something they want. It's obviously by intent, and so I think that they're pushing for and hoping for an influx of new players, which I think is very, very exciting. Obviously, having fresh people come into the game is how you keep it alive. And yeah, so there's lots of avenues for that, which I think is great. I think that Code One was not very successful in the way that they wanted it to be because one of the things Carlos had mentioned was that if there was already an existing Infinity group, they would just teach N4, which I have done the exact same thing. I
Yep.
think that I've onboarded one or two players with Code One because they started with N4. Like, this is a little this is a little much. Can we take it down a little bit? Is there something, can we make things easier somehow?" And so we did Code 1 for a handful of games and then moved it.
Yeah.
So I think that the idea is solid, but it just didn't really work as presented. And
Mhm.
so, like with Operation Sandtrap, there'll be the operation box as we typically expect, 6, 7 models aside, probably an exclusive miniature in the box, and all the things associated with that. And then there's also going to be a start here box, which is going to be a smaller version of that. So you can get just a couple miniatures or so for each side and just kind of play a very simple kind of demo sort of thing was kind of the impression that I got from that. So I
Yeah,
think
it's
that
kind of
that's
like
good.
where the Operation Box starter mission start off with like the 3 basic troopers per side, and you learn movement and shooting. Maybe something like that, but in a more structured format.
Yeah, I would guess like 3 or 4 miniatures aside, yeah.
Yeah,
So I think that'll be good. They're replacing Code 1 and they'll just have essentials. So those are going to be kind of those introductory products like starter boxes
Hmm.
and things along those lines to kind of help people join in. And then there'll be additional products, kind of as we normally see them.
yeah,
But they did talk about one of the big things that they're trying to do is also kind of overhaul their operations.
yeah.
So it's also in terms of not just trying revamping rules and things, which I don't think there will be anything earth-shattering with N5 from a rules perspective. I think it's going to be like we mentioned, generally polishing and cleanup.
It sounded like it was going to be less of a jump from N4 to N5 than it was from N3 to N4.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. But they're going to update their quality for miniatures. It sounds like the plastic resin, the like hard cyocasts, I've heard it called sometimes, that
Hmm.
was used for like the ITS Marut and the most recent 2 tags, the Sokorentai and Tikbalang. Both of that material is going to be used more frequently, I think, which is a great material. I've only been able to play with it on a couple models, but it's really
But
nice.
yeah, it's a lot better than the Siacast that initially they were using. So yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I've generally had pretty good luck with Siocast, so I haven't, you know, had any real major complaints. But I remember that Marut. Like, oh, that's
And
nice.
then you remember the second route, and it was so much better.
Yeah. But yeah, so they want to overhaul their release schedule and how they're producing miniatures and how their distribution works and their packaging and all those sorts of things. Like one of the things that was kind of mentioned was that they want to have more things ready when a faction kind of gets the the pointed finger of CB at them is kind of how it's proposed. But when
Yeah.
they get their time in the sun, more
Hmm.
of it will be ready instead of kind of waiting for the course of like a year or so to kind of get
Hmm.
that update. I don't know what that looks like entirely, of course. I
Yeah.
don't know if they're planning on doing like a big wave with a bunch of products or maybe just have products more consistently or a couple releases a month instead or whatever that looks like. But
Yeah.
basically helping them get to speed faster.
Yeah.
Um,
Now that with alongside that, they did say that when N5 launches, not every sectorial is going to be present right off the bat. What it sounded like to me was vanilla was going to be there, and maybe 1 or 2 sectorials per faction. NA2 won't be there at all to start, but it sounds like they're adding them back in later, which makes sense since they're blended factions. You kind of want to get the main faction set before you start doing the blended ones. But yeah, but everything is, over time is going to come back, it sounds like, and have its time in the sun at the appropriate time for them to do that. They talked a little bit about Merovingia specifically, and they're ramped up and they can do more Moblots and do for that, but they need to make sure everything's kind of set and good with the rule set and everything before they just launch Merovingia as a full sectorial again. Even
yeah,
though we've gotten like the reinforcement stuff and through Cosmoflot, the other aspects of Merovingia that where we've gotten a lot of that range resculpted.
Right.
and looks fantastic. So, but it's just when the time's right, they'll get the rest of it and push it out. I know that's a little disappointing sometimes when you're like, oh, but I play foreign
Mhm.
company, for example, and they're not going to be available when N5 launches. Okay, unfortunate, but they're going to
Yeah.
be there. You're going to get it back eventually.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing that I want to say most curious about. I don't know if that's
Hmm.
actually true, but it's one of the things I'm very curious about is
Yeah.
to see what the release looks like for all of these, hundreds and hundreds of existing miniatures and factions and whatnot, and what that's going to look like in early N5. I'm guessing that the things will be added into Army in a relatively quick order,
Hmm.
but then we'll see like the faction updates start to roll in, probably, Adepticon next year
Yeah.
and things like that. And that'll probably be the first one. And I hope it's ISS.
that that would be pretty cool. It's time.
ISS comes over through the wormhole to this new planet.
Yes,
JSA, what are you
says
doing with
JSA,
that
no.
planet? Who said you could have that?
We'd like to speak to you about your extended warranty. But no, that'd be really cool because right now it's what ISS, Acon, Neoterra, Merovingia, and Caledonia are the kind of the oldest sectorials in some order because everything
Yeah.
else has pretty
Okay.
much gotten an update. Like all of Bakunin's now up to date,
Yeah.
or sorry, all of Nomads are up to date with Bakunin's release.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that'd be. I would be very happy if ISS was a faction that got a redo sooner than later.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is that like a lot of the out of catalog factions got updates from reinforcements effectively.
Yeah,
Like NCA, which I've also been talking about wanting to put back on the table, and I'm working on a Squallow
they
right
made out
now
like
ish.
bandits, dude.
Yeah, they've got a
They got almost
great span of
everything.
things. Yeah, really cool tools now that really change entire, archetypes that you could build around in NCA, which is great. Merovingia from the Ariadne box, Kapu from the Hakazlam
Mhm.
box. Like a lot of these went into
Yeah, Kapus is another one of the
factions.
older ones.
Yeah, and so they were really cool, like half updates to those factions, which is really neat. So and that I think that helps quite a bit.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, generally the idea that everything is trying to be more accessible to players, I think is awesome. They're looking at doing more videos and tutorials and other things to kind of ease the onboarding process as much as possible because I think Infinity does tend to have a pretty high barrier of entry. The rules as a sort of baseline are not wildly complex. Uh, I don't think it's, insanely difficult to grasp most of the basis of Infinity, but there's so many kind of fiddly bits, like how do
mhm,
things interact and things that are difficult to teach sometimes, like the kind of tactics portion. You can understand the rules,
yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily save you from a poor deployment that gets you
You have to
killed.
encounter it and fail,
Right,
and then go, okay, now I know what that does. Next
right,
time I have an answer for that.
right, which makes the game feel very punishing. And I think that
Yes.
that is a way to kind of push people out that want to play the game. Are like, oh, well, this just isn't clicking with me. Like, well, that may not necessarily be the case. It's that, you haven't run into enough things to build that foundational uh, knowledge yet. And that can be hard. Not everybody's interested in that sort of long haul to get to where they feel like they can comfortably play the game.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how much N5 changes that portion. I don't know if it will
Mm.
change significantly, but I hope that makes it a little bit
Yeah.
easier for people to play because I love playing the game and I
Mm.
love having people to play with.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, they were running some light demos with some N5 concept stuff that we got some feedback on, And so we can talk a little bit about what was seen there. And again, this may not be final like N5 rules and stuff, but currently one thing that I see comes up that kind of hangs up new players is the D20 system that is in place, where everything that you do is you have to roll your target number or lower, except for saves. You have to roll over the damage of the weapon or hacking program that you're being affected by. So it's the only thing that's opposite. So what it looks like from the cards that were shown and some feedback we've gotten from people that were there is that they're going to change the damage stat to something called like possibility of survival. And it sounds a little weird because like a combi rifle is damage 13, but the possibility of survival was 7. And as I was looking down some of the cards and stuff that were being shown, it was like, oh, they've inverted the stat. They took whatever the damage was, subtracted it from 20. That's the possibility of survival. And so if the mechanic works how it was doing there, you would roll equal to your possibility of survival or under, and that would be the save. Which, looking at it mathematically, it's identical. You have the identical odds to have the result, but it brings the mental process of how dice rolling in Infinity works to an identical process across the board.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of cool. And in armor, if it works, the way it was shown, things like if you had armor 3, add it to your possibility of survival. Now, when you need to roll a 10 or less,
yeah,
that would and it says it keeps everything the same. It's just the mental process there. But I also kind of like the idea that, my bear runs up to somebody and hits him with a damage 18 hammer. That's actually a possibility of survival of 2. That sounds really intimidating. You got to roll a 1 or a 2 to not die because you got bear hammered.
Yep. Yeah, so I think that's kind of an interesting change. And at first, I wasn't like incredibly keen on it because it feels, for someone who's kind of enfranchised and has been in the game for a long time, it came across as like changing things to kind of just change things. But considering that everything else is roll under, like I feel less concerned about that. There are other things that are changing as well, obviously. One thing that is changing is wounds are going to be vitality. And so
Possibly.
that's, well, I mean, that's something that Carlos specifically mentioned.
Okay, you did. Yeah, I missed that terminology. But wounds are vitality. Did you mention structure?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
But I think that is likely to avoid translation issues.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like the main reason to make that change. And also, I could see it as, for some people, I could see that being maybe a little bit trickier to digest in terms of like, oh, this is how many wounds it has. Like, oh, so it's damaged? Like, no. That's how much total health it has. So now it's like, okay, your health or your vitality is your score, and then you're subtracting wounds from that.
Yeah.
So I could see both of those things, because one, vitality, and I think in Spanish, I think it's vitae, something close to that.
Yeah, that's not one I know.
And are going to be very similar. So again, fewer translation issues and things like that.
Another thing they talked about was changing how CC works, specifically like critting in CC, because they really want the CC specialists to feel like they are CC specialists, and while they can be beaten by something that is less skilled than them, it doesn't always feel great, but they want to like kind of lessen the chance of that. And I guess changing up some stuff there. And one of the things that was kind of shown in the demo games was, instead of where we currently, if your CC it's 23, you add the whatever to your roll, and if you rolled an 18, you'd add the 3 to the 18. I'm at 21. Okay, fine. Now I crit. And so instead of that, which again takes a new player some mental gymnastics to kind of get a hold of that, it sounds like now it's going to be, if you're above 20, you crit on the 20, and then you just keep counting. So 1, 2, 3, and you would crit on low rolls of 120 and 1, 2, 3. And which, I mean, when you're sitting there at a table, I think that that'll make it a lot faster for a lot of players, especially new ones, to make that calculation of what do I need to crit. It's just what's the digits, the single digits there. Bam. Okay, cool. I got those. And and it kind of avoids or mitigates to some degree, when a really great CC model rolls low and then they just get beaten out by somebody that has like generally no business opposing them. So now it's like, oh, I crit you, but then they might still roll a 4 and their opponent rolls a 5, and then that's great. And then the other side of this is it seems like it would avoid the other end of the issue of, well, I rolled a 2, but now I got to add 3 to that, so I actually have a 5, and so I beat my opponent's 4. It just seems like it cleans all that up and makes it a lot, just more straightforward, especially for newer players to understand.
Yeah, and I wonder if there will be a little bit more to that still.
I think there will be,
because that doesn't make it any more lethal currently.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what happens, because I mean, it's already super lethal. But I think the spread of the roll, especially if you roll low, makes it really kind of frustrating for the high CC model when they roll that 1 or 2 and then they get beaten out. But if they're critting on those numbers, then I guess it feels less bad. Like the odds are still the same, but it just, I don't know, it feels less bad, I guess. But there's probably more to it than what was seen in the demos.
Yeah. Carlos had mentioned that there will be not big changes to CC, but cool changes, and generally that if you have a CC specialist, they're going to feel like they are better in CC even more so than now, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. Something's happening with Guided. We don't know what yet, but apparently they're going to make Guided better for both the player that's giving and the player that's receiving the death missiles. We have no idea what that looks like. No details were given, but they are aware of the issues with Guided that many aspects of the community are having in many metas, and they are doing something to address that. Don't know what that looks like yet, but they did say that they are addressing it.
Yeah, so that will change, which I think is good. I don't think Guided needs massive changes, but I do think some tweaking would be good to make it feel more in line with other mechanics in the game.
Yeah.
So that'll be good. Thanks, Cobra Prime, for being sure to add that in there. that was his question of the QA.
Yeah.
A couple things that I also think are interesting are, one, that the overall scale is staying the same, so it's still going to be approximately a 15 trooper limit is the idea. But one of the things that came up during the seminar was asking if vehicles will be in the game, because there's already rules for vehicles
that have never been used.
Yeah, they basically only apply to motorcycles, and only kind of. But there will be the vehicle label in N5, is what Carlos said. So I'm curious to see what that looks like and what that entails.
Yeah, like
that could change things pretty significantly.
Getting an APC, something, because the only time that we've ever really seen vehicle rules in play were some of the weird, like, not tournament scenarios, like narrative scenarios, where it was like try to take out a tank, and like the tank was just like almost impossible to take out just because of its scale versus what, it was like attacking the mega beasts that from Tag Raid, and the rules that those got for those fun one-off infinity missions. It was like that kind of level of like, oh, holy crap, how do we deal with this? I don't think we're gonna get anything like that, but like, what if like a light APC or something to move things? I mean, we used to have the mechanized rule that was supposed to represent that. Well, what if we actually just get a little APC that moves like four guys up to a spot. I don't know what it
right?
looks like, but I'm super
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of potentially cool things that could be done with that. I would hope that it mostly stays at very small scale vehicles, um,
Yeah,
and that it's
more or
very
maybe even just scenario based.
sure. Yeah, yeah, I could see something like that. But I wouldn't necessarily want to see a big influx of vehicles into the game. Maybe like one or two in a faction sort of deal.
Mhm.
And, they have some interesting purpose, but aren't something that
Hey,
feels like you have to take them or anything like that.
that purpose is that we can play Infinity Mad Max.
That must be it.
Yes.
Um, and someone had also brought up reinforcements. So reinforcements was kind of the big showpiece of last Gen Con. And we've talked about reinforcements, and I didn't think it was awful or anything, but it really wasn't a hit. I thought ResOps was way better. ResOps was a lot of fun.
Absolutely agree. ResOps was perfect.
Kind of stole the show.
Yep.
But it looks like that reinforcements is going to be codified into N5,
In some
and
degree.
right. It's going to be part of the core rules. I don't believe that means it will be mandatory, but it's just going to be baked into the game as an option. And the ITS will also have some level of interaction with that. It might still be an extra, is kind of my guess. And anything for reinforcements, they're still planning on having the profiles be playable somewhere, which is great. We get these sweet models. We definitely want to put them on the table without
Especially
necessarily
because
needing a certain way.
JSA is getting their own reinforcements separate from NA2. We got to be able
Yeah,
to use them.
exactly. So, yeah, I think that'll be interesting. I think that there's probably going to be some idea of how to make that work with a non reinforcement list, whatever mechanics surround that to kind of balance it to allow both styles to play together so you can play a reinforcements list or not. It is kind of what I would guess the direction is moving. Because otherwise, you have to have an opponent who agrees to play a separate game mode from kind of the default game that we typically play. And that's not always easy to get.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that kind of covers the majority of things that we were able to find out at the seminar. And it's a really exciting time to be a part of Infinity. So there's lots of change, and it's pretty quick. Like
Yeah.
N5
I mean,
is just around the corner, really.
did you expect this to be the announcement? I didn't expect this to be the announcement.
I didn't expect it, but I suspected it a little bit. I think Mitten Ninja went and found my comment. I'm like, I feel like there's a small chance it's a new edition about a week or so ago. I think that might be what they talk about at Gen Con. So kind of.
Yeah,
Wasn't sure.
like I was more expecting like, oh, like JSA is going to become its own faction. Then, oh, that's happening. Oh, by the way, we're also doing N5 at the same time.
That's why it's its own faction. Ta-da!
Yeah, I mean it's
Yeah.
fantastic. It feels like a short cycle because it kind of is because like both N3 and N2 lasted about 6 years, and we're just coming up on 4 years for N4. But also it's like, oh wait, it's been 4 years. It doesn't feel like it's been 4 years. It has been
Yeah.
4 years, people. So in terms of edition changes, it is a little on the shorter side for most games, but it's definitely not the shortest. I've seen some games kick out an edition in a year or two, kind of
Yeah.
thing. So, but more I think about it, if it's just like an extended cleanup and smoothing some stuff out, making the game more accessible, I think honestly it's on a perfect time to do it. And we're not waiting 6 months or a year after announcement. It's just like it's around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah. So I believe I saw somewhere that October 20th was the launch date. I don't know if I am remembering that correctly, but it is October is what was presented for sure. So very soon. And I think that it's a good idea, even if it doesn't have huge sweeping changes for the game, even just as kind of the marketing tool that it appears to be a part of. Like, it shows people that it's a good time to get into the game. And that alone can encourage people to kind of try things out and take a closer look that they might not otherwise. So I don't expect anything massive, but I'm really excited for the overall balance pass that was mentioned, and I think that'll be really cool to see because it should be fairly telling of how Corvus Belli views the state of Infinity. Because if we start, for instance, like the orc discount that we saw at the demo on the demo cards, like okay, well maybe that's seeing is that just because it's low, relatively low percentage appearance in lists, or is it because the lack of skills are cheapening it, and there'll be more costs for synergistic skills, like stealth on a warband is not the same as stealth on a heavy infantry
Well, yeah, because like the
because we can avoid
Shikami
hacking.
costs a point more than an existing profile. Granted, it has a different weapon, but it had less skills than the current profiles. Kind of thing. So, again, not necessarily final, but seeing that difference with the orc coming down, Shikami staying roughly the same, but having changes and the orc not having changes. I'm curious to see where it all kind of lands out. But yeah, I think you're right. A lot of it's going to come down to some of that synergistic stuff versus not, because orcs are great, but because they don't have a lot of special skills, they may not be getting used as often as other troops. Especially when you're looking at like Pano in specific. Either you're playing military orders and taking heavy infantry there, or you're playing one of the other sectorials or vanilla, where you can take knights, or they have generally outside of Varuna, like some other form of heavy infantry that kind of might just be that little bit extra better that you want.
Right. Yeah. So I hope that that is the case, and that things that synergize are kind of costed that way, and things that don't specifically synergize, like things that are considered kind of generalist profiles, kind of get a little bit of a discount because those
Yeah.
abilities aren't necessarily working together. I think that would be really cool to see. Like toolbox units just be more viable, more approachable, more appealing to put in lists. Because one of those complaints is like, well, you're never going to get a chance to use all of the things that this trooper has, so and you're paying for all of it. So that that's generally the complaint that I hear for those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, okay, well, I was trying to think of a good example, but one didn't immediately come to mind. But things like mimetism appearing to cost approximately 1 or 2 points for how significant of a change that is.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'd love to see fewer direct templates in the game. I think that there are a lot right now.
Yeah.
I think that would be cool to make them, like, they shouldn't go away, obviously, but I think that kind of reeling back a little bit, I think the shotgun change is what did it.
Yeah.
Because now it feels like, nearly every model
And
has
I don't
one.
think the shotgun needs to go back to what it was.
No, I think that that's probably a little too fiddly.
But I do agree. It was shotguns getting it that I think tipped it over, because there's so many models that just have a light shotgun or even a boarding shotgun that just it's there now. That's it. I mean, we'll see what Corvus Belli does if they address that. But I know this would make it more complex. But maybe the shotguns still have to roll to hit before they lay the template down. It just doesn't travel before it gets laid down.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm just saying that was one of the things that you still had to roll to hit with your +6, and then you lay the template. Just it's from your base, not their base.
Right, exactly.
Again, probably not how they're going to address that, but
I don't think
if
so.
if Yeah, if I can make entire lists of models that where every model has a template weapon,
And you still have guns in the list.
and I still have like guns in the list, like it's maybe they're a little too effective and available.
Yeah. So I'm definitely curious to see how things turn out. But I want to kind of wrap things up with our closing thoughts. But before we actually present those, I would like to give a big thank you to all of our patrons who are supporting the show, and really to all of our listeners. All of you who take the time to listen to our ramblings are greatly appreciated. But if you are interested and able to support the show financially, you can find us on patreon.com/metachemistry. And in return, we try and give you some cool benefits to say thank you for that. So you can get access to certain channels of the Discord that are not freely available otherwise, early access releases of our episodes, um, final voting on polls, and things like that. And even if that's not something that you're interested or able to do, we hope that you join us on our Discord. It's in the show notes, so you can find that here or wherever you find this posted. And it's just a great place for more Infinity talk. I'm sure we'll have a lot to say in over the coming months about Infinity and how things are starting to change. It's a good time. But yeah, that said, though, Ian, final thoughts on the GenCon 2024 seminar from Corvus
Well, I
Belli.
think it's absolutely exciting time to be in Infinity or get into Infinity. We're getting so much kind of new stuff and exciting stuff, and it's just the expansion of the brand and this big push to get it more, out there in the gaming public sphere of knowledge and awareness is fantastic. And they're just really kind of hitting all these different avenues between the mangas, the novels, the TV show, the game, hitting on social media. Something that they talked more about that we haven't mentioned is that their partnership with Joy Toy for the action figures keeps expanding. And
Yeah,
I mean, don't get me wrong,
it's
they're
done.
expensive. They're expensive, but they're really high quality and really goddamn cool.
Yeah,
I have a few of them, and from like the very first batches they put out with like the Marauders and the Ratnik, and they're fantastic. And then it looks like they just keep getting better. So I mean, they're just Corvus Belli is really pushing on all fronts, and now especially the other part of the seminar that they did was about Warcrow, because the two-player starter box for that also drops this month. So they're doing a big push there. So they're expanding out into a new game system. So they're pushing on that. The Kickstarter for that's going to be shipping at some point for the Adventures Dungeon Crawler. They've got all these. I think the Aristea computer game
yeah.
is in the works, supposedly coming out next year. So like,
Next sounds
there's
pretty cool.
yeah, and like
I
from what
like
I've
it
seen
quite a
of it,
bit.
it looks like it's awesome. So I'm super excited. There are so many cool things that are coming for Infinity and Corvus Belli in general. I think it's a great time to get in it, or expand into it, or a different aspect of what they're doing if you're already there.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like it's definitely an exciting time. There's so much going on in and around Infinity and around Corvus Belli, and I really am hoping, and I'm sure this is kind of what they're hoping for as well, is that this really is a big push to kind of get Infinity and to a greater extent Corvus Belli kind of out into a more mainstream esque space. And so I hope that does work for them because again, having being able to take something that we enjoy so much and spend so much time on and have just kind of loved for years and years, and being able to share that with other people is really awesome. And so a lot of these things can hopefully make that even easier to share that with people and kind of get them on board and see what it's all about and why we do what we do, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, exciting stuff. Definitely want to keep an eye on how things go with N5 here soon. I'm sure we'll be doing some initial impressions once rules become available and pick up from there. And we're excited to keep bringing you more Infinity content as we get that. Yeah. So with that, I have been Devin.
And Ian. And that's the meta.